Inga walked to work, trying to cope with rising anxiety. She was angry with herself. Really, should she, a former boarding school girl, be afraid of sidelong glances, ill wishes and gossips? She'd seen worse. But the chill wouldn't go away. The suspended sentence had broken her, stripped away her self-confidence and will to fight back. It didn't matter that it was suspended, that someone had forged her signature on fictitious documents. She, Inga, was convicted. And just like that, her whole life turned upside down. At least she'd found work as an office cleaner. No one would even consider her for an interview once they saw her criminal record. Jacob Eriksson, bless his kind soul, had taken pity and hired her. However, the entire office doesn't say hello, checks their bags and hides their belongings. What kind of people were they? Don't they know one cannot be totally safe from poverty in prison? Life can take a very sharp turn. 6 months ago she couldn't have imagined this fate. She had had everything: a husband, a home, a son, a career she loved and a good friend. Or rather, someone she thought was a good friend. When had Rita's envy grown so consuming? Had it always been there, just waiting to surface? It must have been. While John had loved Inga, Rita hadn't dared act on it. Perhaps prosperity truly did spoil people. When John's business was just getting by, he'd rush home after work to his wife and son. On weekends, they'd have simple picnics in the old park, flying kites, while their little son Jamie squealed with joy. Inga had missed the first signs of trouble. Maybe she shouldn't have taken over as chief accountant after Nina Peterson's dismissal. But John had been desperate then, unable to afford an experienced specialist. Or maybe she shouldn't have brought Rita into their business. Yes, they studied together. Yes, they'd been friends. But who says you must hire friends? Rita hadn't just slipped her those illegal documents. She'd started an affair with John too. And John, how convenient for him. Wife, mistress, and work, all under one roof. No need to stretch himself thin, especially now that business was booming and he could afford far more than a hamburger in a public park. Inga wondered if he still flew kites with their son. No way to know now. That dreadful day when the tax office came inquiring about those documents was seared in her memory. Inga hadn't immediately recalled that Rita had prepared them. Only later, seeing her false sympathy and hearing her exaggerated sighs, did she grasp the truth. It wasn't surprising, really. Their friendship had grown hollow long ago, especially after she'd noticed Rita's flirtation with John. Why hadn't she been alarmed when her husband refused to fire Rita, even after discovering the inflated estimates? He had protected Rita but abandoned his wife. Now she was divorced, homeless and jobless, and Jamie remained with him. Thoughts of her son sent sharp pain through Inga's heart. How could she regain custody with her reputation and salary? No court would rule against the father, but she'd fight on. She had to. The office porch loomed ahead. Inga took a deep breath and walked past the smoking managers, keeping her head high. They didn't mock her this time. Good. It's another test for her. It seems that it wasn't enough to forgive her ex-friend and ex-husband. She had to endure these people too, with their barbed words and squeamish attitude. But Inga had no choice. Otherwise, she'd become like them and lose herself. She wondered, had they arrived this way, or had the environment gradually shaped them? Probably the latter. People were fragile, fallible creatures. Fear of losing jobs, bonuses, or social standing broke many spirits. George Vail encouraged this culture, and it was totally unclear for Inga how could such an excellent director as Jacob Eriksson work with such a deputy. Perhaps opposites truly did attract. Enough reflection. Time to clean, Inga said to herself, and go to work. Today was deep cleaning day, and the chief's office needed special attention. By day's end, her muscles ached and her back was stiff. But the office gleamed with spotless windows, polished floors and shining furniture. With a satisfied smile, Inga adjusted the crystal globe on the principal's desk and prepared to leave. She needed to visit Frederick Irons today to begin moving her things. Frederick Irons had been a blessing of fate, sent to Inga in these unbearable times. She still remembered the fear that gripped her at the checkout counter when she discovered her last banknote had vanished from her jacket pocket, leaving her unable to pay. This meant 2 days of starvation, nothing at home but tea. In her moment of complete confusion and tears, a kind-hearted old man standing behind her came to her rescue, paying for her purchase and saving her from hunger. In response to her warm thanks, the old man smiled broadly, his eyes twinkling with kindness. "My child, you're probably still hungry. Come to my place for some tea. You'll warm up, and I'll have company for my lonely evening." Frederick Irons' apartment was like him, clean, neat, bright, with nothing superfluous. They sat drinking tea until past midnight, sharing stories of their difficult lives. When they finally noticed the time, the old man wouldn't let his guest leave. Instead, he led her to a small, cosy room. "You shouldn't be wandering around at this hour. You're a young, beautiful woman, and there are too many troublemakers about. Stay here. Sleep well on the couch until morning." With that, Frederick Irons brought her out fresh bedding and wished Inga good night. The next morning, sipping steaming tea, he made her an offer. "Listen, Inga, stop struggling alone. I live in this 3-bedroom apartment, sometimes feeling lost in all this space. That room you slept in stands empty. Perhaps it's been waiting for you. Why not move in permanently? Just pitch in to pay the utilities, and that's it." Inga hesitated to accept the tempting offer immediately. Who knew? The elderly man had taken pity on her difficult situation, but might he regret it later? Sharing tea for an evening was one thing, seeing a stranger in his home daily was another. So Inga promised to consider it and began visiting Frederick Irons occasionally. Gradually her fears proved groundless. The landlord always welcomed her warmly, asked about her life, praised the pies and pancakes she brought, and would playfully wag his finger as she left. "Think it over, girl, and do agree." After finding the old man unwell during her last visit, with heart medicine under his tongue, Inga made her decision. She would both gain proper housing and look after him. She'd never forgive herself if something happened to her benefactor alone in his apartment. So today, after work, Inga headed to what would be her new home. To her surprise, nobody answered her persistent ringing. Growing concerned, Inga tried again. Soon she heard unfamiliar, energetic footsteps, and the door opened to reveal a brash young man who glared at her. "What do you want? Who are you?" "I'm here to see Frederick Irons," Inga replied, taken aback. "He wasn't feeling well last time, and I agreed to stay with him to help." "Not necessary," the stranger smirked. "What do you mean?" Inga asked, growing uneasy. The young man laughed harshly. "What, you think grandfather's dead or something? Don't worry, he's fine. I'm his son, back in my homeland to look after my father. You can go about your business. We'll manage without you." The door slammed shut, leaving no chance for further explanation. Son? But Frederick Irons had told her he hadn't spoken to his son in years, after refusing to sell and split the apartment following his wife's death, and his son should be older. Gathering her courage, Inga rang again. The door opened faster this time, but the young man looked even more hostile. "Why are you still ringing? Didn't you understand the first time?" "I want to see Frederick Irons," Inga said firmly. "I'll just check how he's doing and leave." "Such nerve," the young man sneered. "He's sleeping. Want me to wake the old man just for you?" The door slammed again, leaving Inga stranded. Her anxiety grew into genuine fear. Something felt wrong. If Frederick Irons were truly sleeping, wouldn't this door slamming have woken him? What was really happening? Inga regretted her long deliberation about moving in. If she were already living there, she could have insisted on entering to retrieve her belongings. but her possessions remained in the heavy bag she carried, never having made it to their intended new home. She had no authority to demand identification from this suspicious character, and he seemed unlikely to provide any. The only thing left to do was to go to the place where Inga had not expected justice for a long time. With a broken heart, Inga went to the police station. The policeman was no more welcoming than Frederick Irons's unexpected guest. "What are you trying to tell me? A relative has come, so what? Should he wake the old man and present him as evidence? Why would he do that? Just because he doesn't inspire confidence in you? Who are you to demand his confidence? You said yourself the old man and his son had quarrelled over the apartment. Maybe he came to make peace, and here you are complaining. Who would welcome you in such a situation? What if your grandfather decides to make a will for you? Do you know how common such cases are? Of course not. You're trying to play Agatha Christie. What's your last name? Marple or Poirot? Please go about your business. I have more pressing matters, a violent husband and unconscious parents who can't explain to their child that fists solve nothing. If you discover an actual crime, you're welcome to return. Otherwise, there's nothing to discuss." Inga left the district officer, panting with resentment and powerlessness. She had never played at being Agatha Christie. She wasn't even a fan of detective stories. But now she was forced to investigate, while the authorities couldn't see beyond their own noses. She couldn't abandon Frederick Irons to this strange man. Something told her he wasn't really his son. No, she couldn't give up. He couldn't forbid her from seeing the old man. Inga decided to return to the apartment tomorrow after work. The next day, gathering her courage, Inga rang the firmly locked door again. The same young man appeared, now with frowning eyebrows. Through the gap in the door, Inga noticed a short, stern man in an immaculate suit, carefully placing papers and a seal into a black leather folder. Something about this rigid demeanour seemed suspicious. When she firmly demanded to see Frederick, dead or alive, the young man gritted his teeth and went to the bedroom. They returned with Frederick, supporting him by the arm. "Frederick, what's wrong? Are you ill?" Inga rushed to the old man, frightened, but he didn't recognise her. He barely responded to anything. His vacant gaze wandered aimlessly, his hands trembling. A large bruise marked the crook of his elbow. "Well, my dear, satisfied now?" The supposed son's voice was harsh and unpleasant. "You see, my father is ill and needs rest. No time for visitors. Go about your business and let the old man recover." But Inga wouldn't back down and went to the police again. This time she confronted the policeman with such fury, demanding justice, that he couldn't brush her off. Grumbling unhappily, he donned his tunic and accompanied her to the elderly man's apartment. Predictably, the suspicious man in the suit had vanished. The young man behaved respectfully towards the authority figure, readily producing both his and his father's passports. Both showed they were Irons, natives of this town. Frederick was asleep, undisturbed by either doorbell or hallway conversations. "Well, father's an old man," the son shrugged. "He's sleeping, not feeling well." The policeman made his excuses and practically dragged Inga out by her arm, hissing at the door. "How long will you keep disturbing people's lives? Troublemakers like you never stop. Satisfied now? I've seen the passport, same surname. Come here again and I'll charge you with false reporting. Remember that." Unable to face going home, Inga found herself at work. The office was empty except for the soft keyboard clicks from the director's office. Consumed by worry and suspicion, she began watering the plants to calm her nerves. The director caught her there. "Inga, what are you doing here? Working a second shift? You know we don't pay overtime." He attempted to joke. Inga, startled by her boss's voice, hesitated at first, but then, finally breaking under days of extreme tension, told Jacob Erickson everything. "Wow, The principal scratched the tip of his nose thoughtfully. All this smells like something criminal, and no one cares except for you, of course. Too bad you don't have the key to the elderly man's apartment. We could have worked something out. Why not? I do have a key. He gave it to me a couple of weeks ago when I found him having a heart attack in his apartment. I just hadn't used it yet. It felt awkward. Well, that changes everything. The director perked up. I have an idea. We bought a tape recorder with plenty of memory for the office. I'd rather not remember why, but it helped solve certain problems. We could hide it at Frederick's place, might learn something interesting. I'll do it, said Inga thoughtfully. There's a gap under the sofa that should fit the recorder perfectly. Just show me how to set it up. Come on, it's in my safe. The director nodded and went to his office. For nearly 3 hours, Inga guarded Frederick Irons's apartment door from the technical floor. Sure, this supposed son would go out for beer or cigarettes. Or should she wait until he falls asleep? No, too risky. Nervously, Inga finished her 5th sandwich, saved for just such a stakeout. Suddenly the apartment door creaked open, and the familiar troublemaker rattled his keys, clearly heading out. Inga came down as soon as the entrance door slammed. She had to hurry. He might just be running to the corner store. The lock turned easily. Inside, only Frederick's heavy breathing broke the silence. Inga tried to wake him, but it was useless. The injection had clearly been strong. There was no time to waste. She quickly set up the recorder under the bed and fled the apartment, escaping through the emergency exit on the 1st floor to avoid the returning criminal. She had no doubt that's what he was, a real criminal. For the next 24 hours of recording time, Inga slept like the dead. The stress had worn her out. Thankfully, the director had given her time off for this purpose. Waking up ravenous in the afternoon, she emptied her meagre food supplies and returned to her post. This time, the wait was shorter. The guy went out to take the trash. Time was tight, but Inga had no choice. She rushed in, confirmed the elderly man was alive, though still unconscious, retrieved the recorder, and bolted for the exit. Heavy footsteps echoed from below. No time for keys. She carefully released the latch and pulled the door shut. Too risky to run up to the technical floor, so she climbed to the next floor and froze in the stairwell, heart pounding. The latch was closed completely, and the unsuspecting guy disappeared into the dark apartment. At home, Inga played back the recording. After ages of just TV noise, bathroom sounds, and the elderly man's groans, a phone finally rang. The guy answered irritably. Yes, what's up? No way. The old man's passing out from just a quarter dose now. I don't get it. At first 1 dose made him so crazy he couldn't sign his name, and now he's completely out of it. What do you mean, stop? He won't sign anything without the dose. Yeah, when he's normal again, I'll call Dave right away. We need to finish this. It's dragged on too long. He's reacting weird to the drug. Nobody else ever reacted like this. He either passes out completely or the dose doesn't affect him. I can't get the dosage right. Good thing that stupid hen's gone. She nearly exposed the whole operation. All right, later. This time, Inga went straight to the head of the police department. Now she had real evidence. They listened with great interest. Apparently these black realtors were already under investigation. After receiving thanks for her vigilance and creativity, Inga headed to Frederick's place to await the outcome. Events were unfolding rapidly. The ambulance and the car with operatives entered the courtyard almost simultaneously. The sturdy officers entered one by one and soon got out with a familiar thug who was handcuffed. The paramedics who went in after them carried out the half-unconscious Frederick on a stretcher. What about him? Will he live? Where are you taking him? Inga rushed to the ambulance. Most likely he will live, replied the tired paramedic. We are taking him to the Central Clinical Centre. If you want to know his condition, go there. A few days later, returning from the now recovered Frederick, Inga came face to face with the district officer. He said hello, glanced sideways, and said, "How is the old man? Is he recovering a little?" "He is. He's already walking around the ward. His hands are shaking less. Do you know anything about those who tortured him?" "Yes, we do. We got them. It's not the first time they've been exposed, but there was no evidence before. This time it got tricky. Frederick didn't react as expected to their drugs. They had their own notary, and they found a junkie with his surname to sign over the apartment. But the man was unpredictable. Frederick once told me that he had paradoxical reactions to drugs. That's why he was very afraid of anesthesia if he ever needed an operation," Inga said thoughtfully. "Listen, I'm sorry about before. It's a tough job. Everyone makes mistakes. You did well. You didn't give up. You saw it through. If you need anything, contact me. I'll always help," said the officer awkwardly. "Thank you, but I'd really prefer never to have a reason to bother you again," Inga answered honestly, and went to prepare Frederick's favourite meal for her visit tomorrow. The next morning, while dusting the director's desk, Inga discovered a package of documents for a new contract. The counterparty was painfully familiar from her past, pre-trial life. She couldn't put the document down, and, hands trembling, began to read the contract. It was shocking. This was a well-established scheme. She, Inga, had fallen victim to one of its variants. Now they seemed to be targeting Jacob Eriksson. She had to wait for him. Entering his office, the director was surprised to find Inga examining the papers from his desk. "Inga, weren't you taught as a child that it's not good to snoop through other people's desks? Or did I promote you to deputy without remembering?" he asked ironically. "No, not at all," the woman flared up but quickly composed herself. "I apologize for overstepping, but I know this firm. The fact that I'm now just a cleaner with a suspended criminal record, instead of a chief accountant with an unblemished reputation, is partly their doing. I started reading because I don't want the same thing to happen to you." "Well, this day promises to be interesting," Jacob said, settling into his leather armchair. "Please tell me both your story and your thoughts on this contract, especially since George Vale has already given me his opinion." He pressed the secretary's button. "Natalia, no visitors, please." As concisely as possible, Inga explained her case and her suspicions about the new contract. As she spoke, Jacob's expression shifted from sympathetic to concerned, the crease between his eyebrows deepening. "So, at best, you'll be denied a tax credit and the firm will face losses. And at worst, you could lose either your freedom or your position," Inga concluded, arranging the contract papers. "Ah, George Vale, you old fox," the director said sarcastically. "Tired of being second in command, so you wanted the director's chair for yourself. Inga," his eyes suddenly lit up with an idea, "could you present this evidence to the management staff? I don't want this to seem like just a quarrel between top managers. Besides, there might be questions I can't answer." "But I'm just a cleaner to everyone," Inga protested uncertainly. "You were?" Jacob raised his index finger. "Were. And now things will change dramatically. I can guarantee that." The next day in the director's office, the department heads stared in amazement at Inga, seated at the end of the conference table. Or rather, they barely recognized her. The quiet woman in a lilac scarf had transformed into an elegant young lady with loose curls, wearing a business olive suit and a ruffled blouse. No one understood anything, but they didn't dare to ask. The meeting was urgent, and the chief was in a bad mood. It seemed wiser to sit quietly and wait. "Well, let's begin," said Jacob, pulling his chair to the conference table, while approvingly noting Inga's transformed appearance. "We have only one matter to discuss, the draft cooperation agreement that George Vale submitted. I have several questions about it, so I sought the advice from an impartial expert. Please welcome Inga Allen, a certified specialist in this field. Yes, don't be surprised. Life is full of surprises. Please, Inga, share your thoughts. Maintaining her composure despite perplexed and openly hostile looks, Inga focused on analysing the contract. She was oblivious to her colleagues' exchanged glances and shrugs, to George Vale's reddening face, to the lawyer who sat frozen, clutching his temples, as he realised what dangerous waters their firm had nearly entered. The long-forgotten thrill of working in her chosen profession emerged from its hidden corner, lifting her spirits and making her forget her troubles. When she finished, silence filled the room. The deputy director sat dark as a thundercloud, while others awaited the outcome. Jacob Eriksson, eyes gleaming with satisfaction, spoke. Well, I believe everything is clear now. George Vale, out of respect for our history, I won't launch a formal investigation. I'll let you resign voluntarily. I trust you'll appreciate my generosity, and Inga, effective immediately, you'll assume the role of my deputy and take over George Vale's responsibilities. HR, please prepare the necessary paperwork. Everyone is dismissed. The meeting's participants remained seated, stunned. Only the disgraced deputy leaped up and stormed out, slamming the director's office door. I congratulate you on this new chapter, the director concluded, giving Inga a conspiratorial wink. The new position captivated her. It proved to be the perfect remedy for her troubles. Inga flourished as she optimized the company's structure, redistributed employee duties, and implemented new software. During her daily reports to Jacob about financial improvements, she failed to notice how his face grew increasingly gentle and his eyes sparkled as she spoke. One day, finally noticing his expression, she stumbled over her words and lowered her eyes, blushing. Don't stop, Inga. Jacob smiled. I'm listening intently. It's just that you're so charming in your organizational enthusiasm. I can't help but want to invite you to dinner. How do you feel about the restaurant King's Hunt? I love its cuisine, Inga replied. The food proved exceptional. They chatted and laughed throughout the evening, forgetting about hierarchy and work concerns.